right, welcome to the last Iowa Files of the season. So whether you're a first timer or a repeat customer, thank you so much for coming here. My name is Gail Brubaker, and I'm the Executive Director of the West Des Moines Historical Society, and we are so happy to provide these programs at no charge with our partners, the West Des Moines Public Library, the Friends Foundation of the Public Library, EMC Insurance, which helps us do the live stream. So if anybody on the live stream has any questions, either on Facebook or YouTube, please go ahead and pop them in the comments, and I will yell them up at our presenter today. So, are we alone in the universe? There are deep questions that delve into, are we superior? Are we part of a cog in a wheel? So Greg Anderson attempts to answer some of these questions as the Iowa director for MUFON. And we are just so thrilled to have him here today to talk about what their investigation shows and what they believe is out there with us. So thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Gail. Get my turn this. Well, you're all here to hear about UFOs. Specifically, my talk will be about UFOs in Iowa and the organization of MUFON and some of the other aspects of that. I'm the State Director for Iowa. I have an associate's degree in electronics, bachelor's of science in computer science and math. I'm a retired systems analyst and computer programmer. I was a member of the APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, in the mid-'70s. And I'm on the Council Bluffs Citizens Police Advisory Board. So I'm from way over there on the other side of the state. Here's essentially what we're going to talk about today. What is ufology? Iowa MUFON history, Iowa UFO history, notable Iowa MUFON cases and types, things commonly mistaken for UFOs. What are they? We'll attempt a little bit of an answer there. Notable ufologists and personalities, how a MUFON case is investigated, how you can become an investigator, and as a surprise at the end, we'll have some Bigfoot cases from Iowa. Well, what is ufology? Well, essentially ufology is the study of UFOs, if you just take the plain definition. Wikipedia has this definition. Ufology is the investigation of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, by people who believe that there may be extraordinary origins, most frequently of extraterrestrial alien visitors. While there are instances of government, private, and fringe science investigations of UFOs, ufology is generally regarded by skeptics and science educators as a canonical example of pseudoscience. Now, I changed the definition and took all the frill, just said that ufology is the investigation of unidentified flying objects or unidentified anomalous phenomena of unknown origin. These studies are undertaken by both the government and private individuals. Let's go back a little bit with the Iowa MUFON history. The picture on the right is a cover of a magazine called the Skylook that was a Midwest UFO publication back in the 70s. It all started in the tri-state area. We've got Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri. And then in the late 60s, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota were added to the ranks. And at that time, they decided that, well, it's more than just a tri-state. We'll call it the Midwest UFO Network. And then in the 70s, they added all these extra states plus more, so they changed it to the Mutual UFO Network so they could keep MUFON as the acronym. And Harold Cowden was the first state director for Iowa. As far as MUFON's history, the first MUFON symposium was June of 1970, and then the first proceedings came out in 1971. So essentially, what you see on the right there is the cover of the proceedings from the 1975 Des Moines, Iowa conference that they had, the only one that's ever that we've ever had in Iowa for MUFON. And at the time, speakers included David Jacobs, PhD, Sherman Larson, Leo Sprinkle, PhD, Ted Blocher, and James McCampbell, and was submitted papers by Jacques Vallée and Ted Phillips. UFOs in 1897. Let's start out real early in Iowa history there. A wave of UFO airships were seen all across the Midwest and Texas, and that included what they call the Aurora, Texas crash. How many people have heard of the Aurora, Texas crash? Okay, great, great. This one, the night of March 29th, 1897 in Omaha, more than 100 people witnessed the appearance of a flying object approximately 12 foot long, spherical in shape, shiny with a steel-like body. The term UFO had not been coined at the time. The report said that the object became so luminous that the brightness awakened people that sleep at night, from their sleep at night, flooded as the lights flooded through their bedrooms. Many of the witnesses went into a panic. Several nights later, the Sioux City, Iowa, another craft, cigar-shaped, attracted more attention from the people there. Similar sightings that night were reported in Cedar Rapids and Burlington, Iowa. The mysterious object was reported to be elongated with a glaring headlight of some kind and a shiny steel hull gliding along with a hissing sound. On April 17th, there was a famous Aurora, Texas crash of an airship. The dead occupant of the craft was buried by the townfolk. There were a lot of more individual sightings in the Aurora, Denton, and Dallas area over the week. In April, they were reported over the entire summer in other areas of the country. There were several reports of the aeronauts talking to the witnesses. They were not aliens, but were normal earthlings. Almost all sightings were made during the night, with a few during the day. There are as many as 3 different objects based on reports. Now, they may have been aliens that were, there's something called a screen memory where different images are projected into your mind and stuff, and that's been part of the ufology for a long time. The airship characteristics, they were mostly, they had bright lights, they had wings that actually flapped. People were observed on board. Again, they looked like just normal humans. They were cigar-shaped mostly. They had fairly fast for 1897, 140 to 180 miles per hour. The Wright brothers hadn't even gotten off the ground yet. And they followed railroad tracks. Now, they thought they followed railroad tracks because their bright lights, they could shine down at the railroad track and they could follow that kind of as a navigation to go from point A to point B. And and also it helped, evidently, the seasickness type thing, the motion sickness on board the craft. This was a hoax in Waterloo in April. They had a fair and they brought along some balloons and stuff and were charging admission and stuff for people to see their balloon. Now, some people think they were mass hysteria. It could be a secret government project. They could be from another world. At the time that the Aurora, Texas, at that time when they buried the subject that was on board the craft, they thought it was a Martian. So supposedly down in Aurora there's a Martian buried. Great railroad hoax, great newspaper hoax, yellow journalism, or fake media as we might call it today, inventions of this world. Who knows? They never did figure that out. And then what happened to them? Well, a lot of them supposedly crashed, at least one crashed for sure in Aurora, Texas. They had buyout by the railroad. They didn't want the competition, a loss of financing, or government intervention.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is the Aurora, Texas one where they buried the alien?
Yeah.
It's on some guy's land and he won't let them?
No, it's in a cemetery. They just don't know. They kind of know where it's at, buried in the cemetery, but the city's not going to let them dig it up.
The city not letting them dig it up, okay.
Okay. This one's on June 3rd, 1920. This witness decided to go fishing, and around 10 a.m. he spotted an object around the size of a 5-gallon ice cream can that was turtle-shaped. It landed around 15 feet from him on the riverbank. It sat there for about 15 minutes without bothering him and him bothering it. He said he was not in a hurry to jump in and run over to it. He said that if it did, he might have killed him. Just when he thought he was going over to it, it took off without any sound and without turning around. The grass where it landed was pressed down. He described it as a shiny blue and translucent, and he concludes it was nothing from planet Earth. 3 people in the Cedar Rapids airport reported seeing a blue circular object with no wings streaking east to west at an altitude less than 1,000 feet. They estimated the speed to be between 300 to 400 miles per hour. There were other sightings in Iowa and that same night from Des Moines to Omaha, and this all happened in 1969. This one, December 5th, 8th, 1973, this was near Underwood in Council Bluffs, green lights. A witness and her 4 daughters saw a green flash in a soybean field near Underwood. It reminded her of a flash of lightning followed by an explosion of green. And on December 8th, 4 men driving on I-29 around 1:45 a.m. saw a solid green crescent of light and looked as big as a mountain. The sighting lasted for 4 to 5 seconds. A Council Bluffs police officer who lives near Iowa School for the Deaf said that he heard a loud bang with a shotgun outside his window. He looked out and his mercury vapor light had turned off. He thought it was first someone had shot it, but the yard was still lit and it was still on. The light went out and all was dark, and around 3 minutes later the yard light came back on. The light had a sensor which probably turned it off. Now this one happened right in Council Bluffs in 1977. This is, if you read a lot of stuff by Jacques Vallée or some of his stuff, he talks about this case a lot. These 2 pieces that you see on here, I have actual possession of the metal. I'd like to get it re-examined, and I'm working on trying to figure that out on how to get that done. There was absolutely no question about what happened in Council Bluffs on the night of December 17, 1977. A UFO ejected molten metal onto the ground. While most of America was sitting down for the evening sitcoms, Mike and Chris Moore, who were each 24 at the time, were driving to Mike's mother's home in Council Bluffs. About a half mile ahead, just above the treetops, they saw a glowing red ball falling toward Big Lake Park. It hit the ground in the city of Gilbert's Pond in Big Lake, where the Missouri River, across the Missouri River from Eppley Airfield. And when onlookers arrived, the impact point was on a small levee. They found a 4-inch thick mass of molten red-orange metal covering the frozen ground, about 16 feet from the road. The metal mass was still glowing 15 minutes later when Mike Moore's father, Assistant Fire Chief Jack Moore, arrived. And after the metal had cooled, Robert Allen, a local astronomer, collected samples. Part of roughly a 40-pound slab went to the U.S. Air Force Foreign Technology Division at Wright-Patterson, and a portion went to the Ames Laboratory at Iowa State University. The Air Force never made its analysis public, but it was later assured local authorities that re-entering the spacecraft debris does not impact the Earth's surface in a molten state. In this report, Ames Laboratory Director Robert S. Hansen ruled out a meteor. Samples were also taken to nearby Griffith Pipe Company in Council Bluffs and the Ames Library, and the metal turned out to be disappointingly ordinary. Now, the first analysis, the analysis they did do at the time, essentially looks like just slag, iron and stuff on it. It's magnetic. I've done other tests on it, but yeah, these pieces were actually gathered up by MUFON investigators in '77. That some Nebraska investigators came over to Iowa and gathered up the samples and had kept those. And how could you dump that much molten metal into a levee half a football field away from tracks? You know, they estimated it weighed about 1,000 pounds worth of metal and stuff. And actually, it was actually seen dropping from what people thought maybe was a craft. Now, there was only like one witness to that, so we're not sure if it actually happened that way or not. This one's a Benton, Iowa, a triangle case. Now, you're going to find we've got a lot of triangle cases in Iowa, and I'll ask you a question here in a little bit, and we'll see if you might know it. It was black as night, no sound. The witness was very reliable, and it was a possible abduction. Now, currently, back in '81, MUFON did not have an experiencer research team, which we do now, where we'll actually, people that think they were abducted or have experiences can fill out an experiencer questionnaire, and then we'll have an ERT representative talk to them specifically. It's a little more private than you add. Well, MUFON, all of MUFON's cases are anonymous, so don't have any fear of reporting anything to MUFON. Burnt circles in the hayfield. The farmer's daughter-in-law heard the dogs barking wildly. She looked out and saw a large light and 8 smaller white lights around it. She could not get her husband out of bed, so there was no further investigation. The next morning, the farmer found the 9 burnt circles in the hay field where the lights were seen. This case was heavily investigated by Dr. Casher and Harry Jordan. Dr. Casher was the regional director for the Midwest for MUFON during that time period. They took soil samples and visited sites several times, and they found no reason for the burnt circles. There wasn't any disease or any other natural cause. March 1995, dark blue rectangular UFO. Well, a family observed a rectangular craft at the intersection of I-29 and 680 as they were coming from Crescent. The underside was a dull blue, and there were different colored lights around the craft. They said it was 40 to 60 feet in length. As they approached it, it followed them for a while and then just appeared. The sighting lasted around 2 minutes. Crescent is north of Council Bluffs, those who don't know. Glenwood, which is kind of south of Council Bluffs. A lot of these have kind of a southwestern flair to them. Neon blue cone UFO. A witness heading south on I-29 from Omaha noticed a pale blue cone-shaped object that was not moving across the sky as a plane would. He pulled over and observed the UFO for around 15 minutes. The witness estimated that the object was 3 miles west of Glenwood from above Highway 34. He noticed a rather large plane appeared from the southeast coming from Offutt Air Base, and as it got closer, the UFO faded in brightness. When the plane went by and was out of sight, back it came and resumed whatever it was doing, and the witness drove away while the object was still over the highway. There's a lot of cases that get reported to MUFON where there's an inappropriate response. A lot of cases, somebody may see a UFO in the middle of the night. We've got a case here I'll talk about where somebody looked out their window and saw something. But they'll look out their window, see a UFO, go to bed, get up the next morning, oh, I saw a UFO. And then it all comes back to them. It's kind of what we call inappropriate response. This one in 2002 was in Council Bluffs, 10 UFOs all in a row. And the copier technician, his friend, saw 10 UFOs flying west in formation, almost as they were going to bump into one another around 10:30 p.m. They continued in a straight line till they disappeared in the west. Now, this was in 2002, but more recent sightings, we have that picture over on the right. That's a Starlink train of satellites, and we've had a lot of those. So if you see something like that, you can report it to MUFON, but we'll tell you right away it's Starlink. and we'll close the case. Here's another triangular case. 48965 from New Virginia, Iowa, down here in the south central part, and it's off I-35, and it's 100-foot altitude. And the witness described it as being dark gray in color with elaborate non-symmetrical design. The lights on the corners were inset, and rectangular light in the middle had grids over the lights. And some of these drawings were done by Dave Kreider, is one of our field investigators from Iowa City. Again, this drawing is also done like this. Iowa City, Iowa, November 16th, 2011. There were 3 craft actually seen that night. This is just a picture, a drawing of one of them. 2 of them were your normal triangular shaped craft, and then there was this strange Y-shaped craft. Let's go back. I'll ask a question here. Of all the triangular sightings that we've had in Iowa, what part of Iowa do you think you would see the most triangles? Anybody have a guess?
Triangles?
Most triangle-shaped UFO reports in Iowa, or where would they come from? Well, it turns out that most of them come from south of Des Moines along the I-35 corridor. It seems to have been a lot, and then you take a jump over to eastern Iowa. We get a lot more cases in general from eastern Iowa. I think it's because of population, and than we do in western Iowa.
And 35 because of the traffic.
Yeah, yeah, and right there and around there. Now this one's an interesting case. It was case 43406. It happened October 11, 2012 at 5:30. Des Moines. Beverly Trout was the investigator, and we determined after we were done that it was an unknown. And essentially it says, the short description is, I was driving on 35 and 80 when I saw a disc-shaped craft fly north with 2 helicopters following behind it. You can see the helicopter there, the object here. 2 helicopters. And the witness was eastbound on I-80 between 5 and 5:30 when mile marker 133.6. Looking east, he saw an estimated 50-degree elevation, what he thought was a dull metallic disc moving south to north. Then he saw 2 helicopters, which appeared to be moving in the vicinity of the disc, and began snapping photos with his cell phone. While the witness was busy with his camera and continuing to drive, the witness thinks the object split into 2 objects, since he believes he got 2 objects in one of the photos. The witness says that after driving about 1,600 feet to Morningside Drive, he lost sight of the helicopters and objects because he was driven past where they were traveling overhead. The witness believes the actual size of the object to be a bit bigger than a human. And if you look at the size of the object compared to the helicopter, I guess that could be. And if you look at it really close, it almost looks like a 55-gallon drum flying through the sky. Investigators' calls to the FAA elicited the information that the Iowa National Guard is flying drones at the facility known as Camp Dodge, some 7 to 10 miles from the location of the sighting. However, a phone call to the Iowa National Guard elicited the information that yes, they did fly helicopters up that day, but they would never be escorting drones. Now, I'm still not so sure it wasn't from Camp Dodge and stuff. If you look at where he was on the interstate and the kind of direction it looks like they were traveling, it looks like if they would have continued straight, they'd have flown right over Camp Dodge. So I'm thinking it was, something like that. Some other cases. This is a triangular one. This was in Marengo, Iowa, June 4th, 2015. Dave Kreider, it's his drawing there of what the witness saw. Unknown. 2 witnesses to a 75-foot triangular-shaped hovering silent craft, bright lights for 10 minutes. Now, we like it when the witnesses will submit their own drawings or their own photos and stuff like that. It helps them and helps us to understand the subject a little bit better. This one happened in Britt, Iowa in September 27, 2015. On that day, I was in Irvine, California at a MUFON symposium that they were having. But anyway, Britt, Iowa, as some of you may know, is the hobo capital of the world. So that's essentially what happened. The reporting witness and his friends were at an eclipse viewing party at a friend's house. I failed to mention that, yeah, there was a moon eclipse going on at that time, and I watched it from California that night, but that's why they were out looking. At around 9:30, just before the moon was in total eclipse, the witnesses observed a triangular-shaped object appear in the southeast and move toward the northwest, passing nearly overhead. As the first object was approaching, they observed a second triangular object coming from a position slightly below and slightly south of the first object. It began to ascend and move toward the first object, and their flight paths nearly intersected. During the evening, they observed approximately 14 different objects moving at various speeds. Now, they may have been some of the same objects, but it happened over a 2.5 to 3 hour period, and you can see all those blue triangles. That's all the areas where they were sighted at. All of the 14 objects observed were triangular and all had lights. Their flight paths took them in all directions, and some hovered in place for hours. The two primary witnesses described one of the triangles that passed nearby overhead as being triangular shaped but slightly curved. They said that the visible surface of the craft was dark in appearance, but the object had a flashing alternating red-green light coming from somewhere underneath. In addition, the object had a white light on each of the three corners, but the triangles made no sound. Electronic anomalies and physical events occurred. One witness said that he lost an entire day of phone records following the sightings, and he showed us the gap in communications on his smartphone. He also took photos of a second object in the northeast, but said that it refused to be photographed. For some reason, the surrounding stars appeared, but the object itself, which was much brighter than the surrounding stars, and did not appear in the photograph. And as Britt, Iowa is known as the hobo capital of the world, I guess the next time they can catch a UFO and not a train. Let's go on to this next one here. Oops. All right. This is the one Burlington, Iowa, June 16th of 2021. The witness awoke about 2:30 a.m. in the approximate date of June the 16th to make a trip to the bathroom. He looked out the west-facing bedroom window, which is about 5 feet above the ground, and noticed a dome-shaped object about 10 to 12 feet in diameter, shrouded in a mist in the commons area of his duplex. He continued to the bathroom, and when he came back to the window, the object was no longer visible. The witness then took us out to the commons area where the landing purportedly occurred. He said that the landing area was much more pronounced 2 weeks earlier. Unfortunately, he didn't get a hold of MUFON right away so we could go out. He called us like said 2 weeks later, and this is one of the ones where he kind of like saw the object, then continued to go to the bathroom, and then no object, went to bed. It's kind of like, you know, I would have been a little bit more fascinated. Maybe I would have hoped I would have gotten a camera. And we took electronic and magnetic field readings as well as Geiger counter readings. And Dave Carter took photos of the area with his infrared camera and also a visible spectrum camera. And all readings proved to be at background levels. Then after returning home, Dave looked at his pictures taken at the site, noticed that 2 consecutive infrared photos just 13 seconds apart featured a small orb. He said the photos to me, sent his photos to me for analysis, and I noted that the orb gets smaller from the first photo to the second, indicating that it was moving away or it was possibly a second object. I noted that if it were a dust mote, close to the camera, real close to the camera, it probably would have been reasonable that it would move completely off frame in 13 seconds. It was not something on the lens, and the pictures before and after don't have any indication of an orb. So you see that's the second one, and then that's the first one. And he had twisted this way also. So, yeah, if dust motes and things like that have to be really close to the lens. So, this one happened in Council Bluffs, right in my hometown, on October 3rd, 2022. It was an IFO. It was a very bright star-like object. I sent the witness and his daughter a photograph or a picture from Google Earth, and I put letters and stuff on there so they would tell me where they were specifically in the field and what direction they saw the object, and when before at the start and the end when they saw the object. And they essentially, this, like I said, happened on October 3rd. Well, you've got October 3rd here, you've got this minus 3.6 magnitude transit of the International Space Station. Minus 3.6 may sound not very bright, but in orders of magnitude for stellar objects, the lower the number, the brighter the object is. So minus 3.6 is a fairly bright object. You'd really be able to see it coming across the sky. This is from astroviewer.net. It's another app, and this shows the path as it's coming across the sky and what they saw. Those are easy ones to understand. I have unknown on there, which that should have said IFO. It did on the previous slide. And one of the things we get is we also get hoaxes. Now, this just a picture is, if you look at it, the lighting's not right, all kinds of things are screwed up on it, and that was a hoax. There's two different types of hoaxes. There's something called a hoax event, where the witness throws like a frisbee or something, and we see then that they film the object and then report it to MUFON as a UFO event. Well, and then there's something called hoax keystroke. That's essentially where somebody gets on the computer, starts filling out the stuff, and makes stuff up as they're typing. I had a hoax from a girl in southeast Iowa, a teenage girl. About halfway through the detail, she's giving all these really crazy specifics on the detail. Then she stops just like that in the detail and says, I'm just a bored teenage girl and I'm making this all up. So it's like, okay, that one's easy. It's a hoax. Now, these are some of the types of cases that we'll have. Starlink cases. Anybody here seen Starlink? Okay, all right, good. Essentially, that's what a train of Starlink satellites looks when they're spread out in their train. I've got another image. It's not really easy to see, but it shows them when they're still kind of crunched together. But we've had Algona, North English, Bettendorf, Oelwein, Urbandale, Des Moines, and Greenfield. We've had all kinds of cases for Starlink. In fact, there are so many cases coming into MUFON for Starlink that we've got a rapid case closure system now on what they call the case management system, to where we can close these. Essentially, I just go in as state director and close them. Now, this one, like I said, it's kind of hard to see, but it's kind of a smudge mark there. That was in Ventura, and Larry Moore was the investigator, and that was also Starlink. That was prior to the objects being let out ejected. Flight Radar 24 cases. Flight Radar 24 is an airplane tracking system that's pretty popular these days. Some people may have heard of it. I'll show some examples of some public things. We use it a lot. Since we've had several cases we've been able to identify ever since this came out. I've got a subscription where I can go back 3 years and get all the data in a certain area. Now, it doesn't show every plane in the sky. There's ADS-B transponders on the planes. The military doesn't necessarily, won't show up on here. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But for the most part, if it's just a commercial helicopter, jet, some other kind of flight, you'll be able to see it. Sometimes it says blocked on it. Well, it still shows the object, but it says blocked. This is one I handled in Larchwood, Iowa in 2021. I went in, the witness said that he saw two objects. At the time, he didn't know what they were. He saw two objects and didn't send any pictures or anything, but I went into Flight Radar 24 and I found there were 3 different stratospheric balloons. Now, right here in Sioux Falls, there's a company that Raven Aerostar that launches these balloons. They don't always launch them from Sioux Falls, but they might take them somewhere in the United States and then launch them. But I've seen balloons launched from Sioux Falls go all the way to the Pacific, out into the Pacific, and then come back all the way in a couple days, come back to the Sioux Falls area, so they can get around. Now this one's was Jason Moran's Sioux City case, and this is a picture that was taken of the balloon and stuff. But you'll notice that the icon is not a balloon, it's a jet. Well, for some reason, Flight Radar 24 shows those as jets. So what you have to do is when you see an object that's in the position where the witness saw it, you have to click on that icon, and then it'll show you the speed. And if it's going less than 10 miles an hour, it's probably not a jet. Here's one that Beverly Moore handled, a flight coming into Marion. This one was in Ottumwa. Dave Pratt, another investigator, handled this one. It had a contrail. It had a contrail as it was going up and stuff. And so it was kind of coming straight toward him, and then the contrail was lit up by the moon. So it was a real interesting one to handle. And here's a couple Dave Crowder handled. Again, like I said, this information over on the left is, they've got all kinds of stuff about the planes, the speed, the altitude, different things, what airline it is. And here's some uses of interest. These are the public things that Flight Radar 24 will show you. SPAR 19, that was Nancy Pelosi's flight to Taiwan that she took, and then that was the track as people tracked that flight. When the Ukrainian war started, Ukraine's right there in the middle, and all the planes were flying around. And remember what I said, the military doesn't have the ADS-B transponders at least turned on while they're in that area. But yeah, that's an amazing shot. This one is in 2017 where a Delta flight was flying down into that area. Again, it was at 35,375 feet, and tells the aircraft it was a 737. This was set an all-time flight tracking record. This was Queen Elizabeth II flight when she went from Edinburgh down to the London area and to be interred. Zephyr 8. Zephyr 8 was it was a drone that set a record for staying up. The uncrewed flight duration of it was 40-some days, and that's part of the path on it and stuff. Is it just flew around and just flew around and flew around for 40-some days. This one came out right about the time of the Chinese spy balloons. There was one on Flight Radar 24, and they said, sorry, this is not a Chinese balloon. Lens flare cases. A lens flare is another type of case that we get a lot of. Here's an example of a case that Jason Moran did. And you can see up here, that's the flare. There's the bright light. Again, that's the flare, bright light, flare, bright light. Now, when you take these pictures, and I don't have the whole picture here, but if you draw a line from the top right to the lower left, and the top left to the lower right, that intersection point right about here, and then you draw a line between the light and the flare, it goes right through that center part of the picture. And that's one way of determining lens flare. It doesn't always work out that way, but for the majority of the pictures it does. Here's another one showing a flare up on the top from the sun down here, and then the same picture they took this way. You can see the flare down here. Now, things most commonly determined to be UFOs, military aircraft. We've got like B-22s or B-2s and stealth fighters, and there's a new craft that they talk about called Aurora, which may or may not be a craft. I saw a video the other day that showed kind of something as it was being launched that kind of like it had puffs behind it, like it was being a launch, and it was this was in Oklahoma, I think. They've shown pictures of strange contrails where they look like donuts on a rope, and those are all military craft. Meteor fireballs. When something comes into the atmosphere and it's really bright, some people, I mean, a lot of these things seem common sense, but to some people, they're kind of an extraordinary event, and they'll report it to MUFON. Again, the lens flare is common, very common. The moon. You would think the moon's been around for a long time, that we wouldn't get cases on the moon, but we still do. If the atmosphere is just right, or it's behind something or next to something, down close to the horizon, people get confused by it. International Space Station. And besides the International Space Station, there's the Tiangong, is a Chinese space station. Now, there are apps. Heavens Above is one of them. Astroviewer.net is another one, where you can look up the ISS pass and when it's taken. One thing to do with those apps is to go in and it'll predict when it's going to go over your area. So if you enter your latitude and longitude into the app and then look, it'll show you in the future events how, if the lower, remember the lower the number, the brighter. So it'll show you events where you might, if it's clear, you can go out and watch it go over yourself. Satellites, SpaceX is really, they've got a lot of satellites up there now, and it's really caused this problem. There's a new one called Blue Walker 3, which is a kind of a communication satellite that's been causing a little bit of problems. I haven't seen any MUFON cases yet for it, but yeah, it's a pretty bright object. Now, this is probably not the best cloud picture that shows a UFO, but lenticular clouds, lens-shaped clouds, are commonly inferred to be UFOs. Sky lanterns are Chinese lanterns. Now, this is not what you'd normally see, all these, but around the 4th of July and other time frames, we get reported cases of sky lanterns and stuff. The planet Venus. Venus has been, around for a long time. But it's so bright sometimes, people are just saying, no, that can't be a planet, it can't be a star, it's got to be something unknown. Space debris. You know, as a satellite or something breaks up and comes in to Earth orbit, and it goes, that's reported as a UFO. Now here's one of the this was a picture of the Chinese spy balloon, or it was stratospheric balloons. Stratospheric balloons fly, you know, they're flying like 60,000 feet or better in altitude. And also weather balloons are mistaken for UFOs. And there's a lot of weather balloons that are launched every day in the United States. Rocket misfires. Well, in this picture, what happened is the rocket was fired and it went out of control, and it was losing its fuel, and that was all lit up and ionized in the air, and it made that neat picture. Looked like the world was coming to an end.
What kind of a rocket?
Just a regular
I mean, like
missile.
a NASA rocket?
Just a regular rocket that this one was launched, I think, from somewhere around in Russia or Sweden or somewhere like that. Yeah.
I did see it on the internet.
Yeah. And bugs and birds. A lot, you know, with people having a lot of digital cameras now and their phones and stuff, they'll take pictures and they'll say, I saw this object in the picture after I took the picture and I didn't see it before. Well, if the bug is fairly close to the lens, it's going to kind of be blurry and you're going to wonder what it is. In this case, this is an actual case from Iowa where I enlarged it and saw that shape, and then I found this picture with a proboscis just like this, the two, and determined that it was a bug fairly easily. Now this one, over on the other side, this is pelicans that are flying in the sunset. So it's a fairly easily, especially if you have a video and they show them flying around and stuff. Now the big question is, what are they? Well, are they terrestrial? I mean, do they come from other countries on Earth here? Is it some kind of advanced tech that the United States or some, you know, we don't know about? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Are they extraterrestrial? Do they come from outside the Earth? Do they come from the Moon, Venus, Saturn, another galaxy? And again, they don't know for sure. I mean, a lot of times in the 50s there was a contactee movement, and they started out saying they were like from Venus and stuff, and then Saturn, and then once it was determined scientifically that those were hostile environments and stuff, all of a sudden the aliens, the contactees changed their mind, and all of a sudden they're coming from another star system, you know. Are they time travelers? It's speculated that they're coming from the future, that for some reason to try to give us some type of warning, possibly. Then the other one is interdimensional. Are they dimensions that are right here, right now, and there's, you've heard of the multiverse and things like that. Well, maybe they are interdimensional, or are they a combination of the interdimensional and the time travelers and encompass a larger space-time continuum, and they would be called ultra-terrestrials? And then finally, are they angelic or demonic? Now, I know that a lot of people don't like this, say one way or the other, like, are they angels or demons? But we have to consider the possibility. Now for some notable Iowa ufologists. How many people know Beverly Trout? Yeah, all right. She's had 28 years as an investigator for MUFON, and she was a previous state director with many private cases coming to her personally from witnesses who did not wish to report to an organization. And she chose to leave MUFON in July of 2020 and function as an independent researcher for that same reason, that she was getting a lot of cases that people didn't want to report to MUFON. She's known publicly as an experiencer with some conscious encounters with UFO crews. She spoke at the 1999 MUFON Symposium in the DC area, as well as the Ozark UFO Conference at Eureka Springs in 1998 and 99. And she's spoken at conferences in some other states as well, Washington State, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. And I really miss her as my assistant state director. She did a great job for us and MUFON. Brad Steiger. He was born, raised, and educated in Iowa, was an American author of fiction and nonfiction works on the paranormal, spirituality, UFOs, true crime, and biographies. His books sold well to the public, but were widely criticized by academics and skeptics for making far-fetched claims without scientific evidence. He was a proponent of the ancient astronauts idea, and Steiger stated that many humans descend from alien beings. He referred to these beings as star people. Donald Kehoe, another big figure in ufology. He was born in 1897 and raised in Ottumwa, Iowa. In 1927, he managed the coast-to-coast tour by Charles Lindbergh. It's quite a while back then. And he's the founder of what's called the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP. And he wrote Flying Saucers Are Real, a major book read by many in the UFO community. He argued that the Air Force knew that flying saucers were extraterrestrial, but downplayed the reports to avoid public panic. Kevin Randall, and how many people heard of Kevin Randall? Okay, one, okay. Well, anyway, Kevin is an American ufologist, a science fiction and historical fiction writer, and a military veteran within the UFO community. He's often regarded as one of the preeminent experts on the reported crash of the UFO near Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. He retired from the Iowa National Guard as lieutenant colonel in 2009 and lives in Cedar Rapids. Now, I lived in Cedar Rapids in the mid-'70s to late '70s, and while I was there, I had an associate's degree in electronics. I was working for Rockwell International, Collins Rockwell, and there was an adult education class called UFOs Fact or Fiction that came up. Well, I went to the class, and it was hosted by and being taught by Kevin Randall. Didn't have the gray hair back then, much younger and stuff. So that was an interesting class, and it was like, I don't know how many weeks, 10 to 12 weeks long. Well, about the third week, I'd say, he comes in and the class, and he's dressed in a trench coat. And couldn't figure, that was just odd that he was dressed in a trench coat and stuff. Well, about 10 minutes into the class, though, somebody comes to the door of the classroom, this was prior to metal detectors, pulls a gun out, shoots Randall, he falls on the floor, and then jumps right back up. The assailant takes off. He jumps right back up and says, okay, now everybody write down what you saw. And it turns out that Kevin's also got a doctorate in psychology and stuff, and I think this was one of his things he was doing for his doctorate, trying to determine, real life exercise and stuff. Well, there were people in that class that were much older that could have had a heart attack. Yeah, when that happened. I could barely write to write down what I saw. So, that was my story about Kevin. And I've talked to Kevin a couple times since then. The last one is Philip Klass. He was born in Des Moines and raised in Cedar Rapids, and is a journalist known for debunking UFOs. He went on several TV shows and stuff, and was always there to debunk things. Now here's an interesting picture. It's got Kevin Randall and Philip Klass on the Larry King show, and they're both like Cedar Rapids boys, and they're all both together on the Larry King. This is, okay, on how do we investigate a case? Well, first of all, the witness goes on MUFON.com, remember that, MUFON.com, and reports the UFO to what we call our case management system. Essentially, they'll fill out a questionnaire and stuff. Then the CMS coordinator will put on the Valet scale on the case. This is what the Valet, Jacques Vallée came up with a system where he's got close encounters, maneuvers, flybys, and anomalies. And then within those 5 categories, you've got sightings, physical effects, life forms or living entities, reality transformations, and psychological impact such as death or serious injury. Now here's just a chart showing some of the things. Most of the time what we'll have is an AN1 or a FB1. Very, very few have gotten up to the 3 category that we've had recently in Iowa. But like I said, it could include psychological effects, including death on the CE5. Then once this case is assigned its classification, it's sent to an investigator, sent to the Iowa group here. And myself or my chief investigator, Dave Crider, will assign the case. And then the witness should, within 72 hours, should either contact the witness by phone, email, and if possible, set up an interview, and also stress that it's anonymous. There is a checkbox on when you're filling out the questionnaire whether you want to keep it anonymous and or not, and usually people check that they do, and we encourage them to. You'll interview the witness either with a phone, email, or a possible site visit. Now it used to be that we did site visits quite a bit. Then COVID hit, and then with emails and all the other stuff, we can pretty much do most of the legwork, unless it's something we have to actually physically be on site to see some type of structure or some type of area that was damaged by it. And then the background investigation is done. The background investigation is not done on the witness. The background investigation is the field investigator going in and doing flight radar 24 analysis, the weather, all types of things that we'll do. Take pictures of the site, use Google Earth or something to determine things. Then once the investigator has determined what it is, they'll fill out they'll fill out the report on CMS, and then they'll finalize it with one of these. It's either an unknown UAV, aerial vehicle, unknown other, a light in the sky, just something else. IFO is an identified flying object. Insufficient data, I mean, they've got just some stuff. We can't get a hold of the witness again. They didn't put down enough information for us to glean anything from it at all. Now, we can close case. We don't have to get a hold of the witness. If there's enough information on the case that comes in, we can close the case as an IFO or something else. Information only, it's sometimes those are third party, or they're like 50-year-old sightings and somebody's telling us about. And again, what I talked about earlier was the hoax event and the hoax keystroke. We had about 3 years ago, we had 5 hoaxes in 1 year, and that was the most that we've had. And then you inform the witness of the findings. Now, statistically, by this time of year, we'd have had more cases in Iowa that were reported. For the last 2 months, we've had 0 cases reported, and that's never happened in Iowa, as far as what I know of.
I have a question about your form. Below the weather elements, does it literally have alien descriptions? What is that? Human-like, gray, ape-like, reptile-like, insect-like?
Yeah.
Is that to indicate an actual contact with an alien and a general description?
Yes, that is. If they've seen, and that'll help determine its classification again also. It's going to be a 3 or better if they actually saw an entity of some type. And that's just a screenshot of part of the form. I just kind of wanted to show you what it looked like. Now, investigation tools, things that we use to do our investigations. A little Geiger counter, I've used a couple times. The Burlington case and some other cases I've used my Geiger counter on. An inclinometer and compass. Essentially, it tells us how, we can measure angles and elevation above the horizon with that. An ultraviolet flashlight. If there was an entity involved and that entity were to have touched something or someone, the witness, we can sometimes use an ultraviolet flashlight and that area will fluoresce on the skin. Tri-field meter. This is mainly for electromagnetic, readings. I mean, it's kind of one of the same things that you might use as a paranormal ghost investigation. Then something as simple as a tape measure. We need to measure distances. We can use that. But then one of the most important tools is your smartphone. You can put several apps on here. You can put the Flight Radar 24, the weather information. Stellarium Web is an astronomy app that you can get on there. You can have your inclinometer and your compass built into an app, and it even does EMF readings. So the phone is an important aspect as far as doing your cases. And a lot better signal. Before, you can actually get from the Google Maps, you can get actual coordinates to the site and stuff and measure distances. This again was Flight Radar 24, again, one of the apps that we use. Heavens Above, this was Heavens Above. Stellarium Web. This one will show you once the Starlink satellites are in orbit, they're planned fixed orbits, it'll show you on there, you'll see some Starlink, you'll see a Starlink star going across in real time, or you can go back in time and look at it. Weather Underground, we essentially do weather information for every case that we report, whether or not it involves anything with the weather or not. Here's Google Earth Maps. Here's right where we're at. We're sitting right in here. This was using. Now, Google, it's really great. You can set points and then measure distances on there very easily. You can take some of the Flight Radar 24 data that you have on a flight, convert it in Flight Radar 24 to what's called a KML file, and then load that KML file into Google Earth and see its track as it goes across the United States and stuff. You can view it from different angles, so you can see it from the side, elevation-wise, if that's part of your investigation. Now, how to become a MUFON field investigator? Well, first of all, you need to become a member of MUFON. Talk to me or a provincial or national director. Get a copy of the MUFON Field Investigator Manual. Study the manual and take a certification course. Take the Field Investigator Certification Exam at MUFON University. The exam is 100 questions. It's open computer. It used to be open book. You still can, you still have your manual, so it's essentially open book, open computer. And you have to get 80 or better. And then once you do that, you can become a field investigator. And you'll mentor with a field investigator, another field investigator. Now here's one I was talking about, Bigfoot cases. This is the last stuff. Okay. In January of '74, the witness walked out in his driveway to see friends off about 2:20 a.m. and saw a shadowy form moving between some cars in the driveway. He paid no attention as he thought it was dogs. He went back into his house and a few minutes later heard a high, shrill scream very loudly. He grabbed his deer rifle and hurried outside. There, illuminated by the snow, was a big, hairy creature estimated to be 7 foot tall. When it was about 75 feet away, he shot it. It was knocked backwards and fell to the ground. By the time he was able to reload, it was gone. The following morning, no tracks could be seen as horses had been in the same area, and some blood was on the snow. Now, unfortunately, in '74, we didn't have the DNA resources that we have now to where we could have gotten some of the blood and analyzed it. Then in August of the same year in Sioux City, the witness was awoken by his dog in the back entryway barking. He then heard the loose railing on the back porch rattle. He observed an upright, hairy biped 6 feet south of the bedroom window. As it turned on its left side toward the witness, its right shoulder was lower than its left. It slowly walked around the corner of the garage with a shuffling gait. It had its head pointed and somewhat stooped stance. It had hair all over and estimated at least 200 pounds. There were footprints on the wet grass estimated to be about 8 inches wide. Now, my speculation is that they were the same creature. In January, it was shot. In August, the witness sees it and its right shoulder's hanging down, like it's injured. So I'm thinking that it was the same creature in January and August of that year. It's probably just Midwestern friendly, but it kind of creeps me out. And then visit MUFON.com. You got the Pioneers of the Territory statue. We don't want them to take that. And questions? Oh.
What was the website about? AstroView?
Astroviewer.net.
Thanks.
All right.
How much does light pollution influence in sightings now?
Light pollution? That bothers a lot. The astronomers are complaining about Starlink because there's so many of the Starlink paths. They'll take long exposures, and there's so many of the Starlink satellites that pass by that they have to, with software, they have to eliminate them in the sky. Now, some phones that you have nowadays will actually eliminate movement like that too. If you're taking a picture of on, say, your iPhone or even an Android phone, you take a long exposure in the astro mode, it'll eliminate things that are really quick moving. It just takes a bunch of frames, puts them all together, and eliminates all that extraneous movement on there. So if you're trying to take a picture of a UFO in night mode on your phone, it may not show up because of that. Any more questions?
I just have a question about, what kind of craft do they fly out of Camp Dodge in Johnson? Do they just have sort of standard helicopters or?
As far as I know, they've got those Blackhawks or whatever and stuff.
They also fly Chinook,
Chinooks?
the big dual blade ones.
Dual blade.
Yeah, they transport stuff.
Okay, yeah. And there's, that those helicopters were over Des Moines area. Well, I don't know what their range is, but you'd think they'd have to be fairly close, and they were flying fairly low. I still think they were heading for Camp Dodge, and that was some kind of advanced drone, and one of those things that we may have that they're not telling us about.
I'm going to go ahead and stop the live portion of this. Everyone is more than welcome to stay and ask any questions. We're not letting you leave anytime soon. But we're going to end the video portion of our program. Again, this is our last Iowa Files for this year. We'll start up again in September. No, I don't know what we're going to be talking about, so if you have any suggestions, I'm always open to hearing your ideas for what would be a good program. If you've enjoyed this, please consider becoming a member of the Historical Society. It's your donations that help us provide free public education like this and pay the light bill. Consider donating to MUFON for all the work that they do. So thank you so much. Thanks to the West Des Moines Library, David, our videographer, and have a great summer.
If you want to